Police officers, what domestic violence call made you turn in your badge that same night? The dispatch came through at 11:30 on a Wednesday night, code for domestic disturbance at 1847 Maple Grove Avenue in the suburbs, where houses had manicured lawns and two-car garages. I was 3 months from retirement after 26 years with the department, counting down shifts until I could collect my pension and never wear this uniform again. My partner that night was Officer Jamal Foster, 28 years old, eager and still believing the job meant something beyond paperwork and politics. We pulled up to a colonial-style house with all the lights blazing, neighbors standing on their porches watching the show. A woman stood in the driveway wearing a bathrobe, blood streaming from her nose, holding a crying child against her chest. The child was maybe 4 years old, small enough to hide his face in his mother's shoulder. The woman's name was Rebecca Whitmore, 32 years old according to her identification, and she was shaking so hard she could barely speak. Her husband was inside, she said, and he had a gun. Jamal called for backup while I approached Rebecca, keeping my voice calm and steady in the way 2 decades of experience had taught me. She told me her husband David had come home drunk, started yelling about dinner not being ready, shoved her into the kitchen counter when she tried to calm him down. When their son started crying, David had backhanded her across the face, then pulled a handgun from the closet and told them both to get out before he did something he would regret. Rebecca had grabbed the boy and run. She was crying now, telling me this was not the first time, that David had been getting worse over the past year, that she had called the police twice before, but nothing ever changed. I wrote down everything she said while my stomach twisted with the familiar rage that came from hearing the same story for the 26th year in a row. Backup arrived within 5 minutes. 2 patrol cars with officers I recognized from the precinct. We established a perimeter while Jamal tried calling the house phone. No answer. I approached the front door with my weapon drawn, standard protocol for armed suspect situations, while 3 other officers positioned themselves at the back and side entrances. Jamal stayed with Rebecca and the child, taking their formal statements. I knocked on the door and announced myself as police, ordering David Whitmore to come out with his hands visible. Silence. I knocked again, louder this time, repeating the command. The door opened and David stood there in jeans and an untucked dress shirt, no visible weapon, looking confused and irritated rather than threatening. He was tall, maybe 6'2", athletic build, clean-cut appearance that would photograph well in a courtroom. He asked what the problem was in a tone that suggested we were interrupting his evening rather than responding to his violence. I told him we had a report of domestic assault and needed him to step outside. He laughed and said his wife was being dramatic, that they had argued but nothing physical happened, that she was always overreacting and wasting police time. I asked about the gun. David's expression shifted slightly, calculation replacing confusion, and he said he owned firearms legally and had done nothing wrong. I asked him to step outside again, more firmly this time. He complied, moving slowly onto the porch with his hands partially raised in a gesture of cooperation that felt performative. I could smell alcohol on his breath from 3 feet away. I asked if he had been drinking. He said he had a few beers with dinner. Nothing excessive, certainly not enough to justify this circus his wife had created. One of the other officers moved into the house to secure the weapon while I kept David on the porch. Rebecca was still in the driveway crying, her son clinging to her, both of them watching David with expressions that mixed fear and exhaustion. David saw them and shook his head, muttering something about drama and manipulation that made my jaw clench. The officer emerged from the house holding a 9mm handgun in an evidence bag and confirmed it had been loaded. I arrested David Whitmore for domestic assault and weapons charges, reading him his rights while he protested that this was ridiculous, that I was destroying his life over nothing, that his wife was mentally unstable and making false accusations. He demanded to speak with his lawyer, which was his right, so I stopped engaging and processed him into the back of my patrol car. Rebecca gave her full statement to Jamal, describing not just tonight's incident, but a pattern of abuse spanning 3 years. David had never hit her badly enough to require hospitalization, she explained. Always careful to leave bruises where they would not show, always apologizing afterward and promising to change. She had stayed because she loved him, because he was a good father when he was sober, because leaving seemed impossible when he controlled all their finances and had threatened to take their son away if she ever tried. Tonight was different because he had struck her in front of their child, had pulled a gun, had crossed a line that terrified her into finally calling for help. I drove David to the county jail while Jamal transported Rebecca and her son to the hospital for medical documentation of her injuries. David was silent for the first 10 minutes. Then he said, "To see the full story, click the link below or go on my channel."